All right, guys, our favorite time of the week again when we get to answer a few of your questions. Saagar, what's up first?
Number 1 from Wool. Okay, let's make sure I say this right. Olsen-Schneider. I hope that's correct.
I think you got it.
Anti-higher education as it exists, populism. I am curious for both of your thoughts on the potential for reforming higher education boondoggle. Politicians like Andrew Yang have spoken directly to the ballooning administrative bloat as the cost for tuition increases. Given higher education's lobby influence in Washington that Saagar has discussed, what is the potential for an ecumenical coalition to end the college for all model and adopt Germany's apprentice system or something similar? It's a really interesting point.
Yeah, it is an interesting point. I mean, I'm thinking about it as we're talking. So first of all, look, I believe in the value of good education and higher education that teaches people how to think, teaches them to think about citizenship, about their role in democracy. I'm not sure they're always getting that at our 4-year universities, but I'm not like anti-higher ed. Let me put that out there. However, I do think the fact we've used education as a crutch to avoid resolving other social issues. So we always hold out this idea of like, oh, well, if you just get educated, we just need better education. We just need everybody to get educated. We need everybody to go to college, and then that'll solve all our problems. That puts it on the individual rather than recognizing that society has come unglued, that more and more wealth is flowing to the top, that these disparities and inequalities really don't have anything to do so much with the education system. It's a way of shifting blame onto the individual rather than society taking responsibility. There's also another elitist attitude that says, you know, only a college education, a 4-year or higher ed education makes you an educated, intelligent, and worthy person. And that is totally, completely crap. There are many types of intelligences. The type that's rewarded in a 4-year bachelor degree type university is only one type. There are many people who are remarkably effective and talented and intelligent when it comes to working with their hands and working in skilled trades. Honestly, that's the actually essential work that keeps the country running, and it should be treated and valued and supported in that way as well. So in terms of a political coalition to come together, I think you've seen a little bit of signs of interest. You had, some movement towards apprenticeships, some talk of apprenticeships from both Republicans and Democrats. You've had part of, the apprenticeship programs have oftentimes come through labor unions. You have some increased activity within the labor movement. You have widespread support for the labor movement. So I do think the population at large is already there. It's just a matter of getting the politicians to support that direction more directly with policy.
Yeah, it's when you're talking, I just think, first of all, you have correctly identified where a lot of the money is coming from. And this is why I don't support any sort of student debt reformation or cancellation without massive change to the higher education system and the way that it charges people. And really what it is that it is built upon that false myth that we don't value everything such as apprenticeship or more through public policy. So until we fix the funding structures and also the people who can charge whatever the hell they want without any risk whatsoever, then it's a total crapshoot. But part of the problem is that the people who generally push student debt cancellation don't want to have that conversation around higher education reform, and the people who want to push higher education reform don't want to have the conversation around student debt. You have to do both. That's the only way. It's the actual cross-coalitional problem there. That's why, as a populist position, I think is very true, but getting it done in practice for the current party structure, it's gonna be hard.
Well said. All right, we got an anonymous question here next. It says, I am a proud lifetime member. Thank you. You're amazing.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you both so much for what you are doing, even when my perspective might differ somewhat from yours, which actually we love hearing because it is so often that people are just in their little ideological bubble. When you disagree with us, that's fantastic. Thank you for continuing to support us and listen anyways. My family and I want to financially help the various striking, walkout, and resigning workers who may struggle financially while standing up for a better balance of labor corporate power, which is so critical for our nation's health. Could you two use your journalistic expertise to help figure out if there are legitimate outlets to whom we can donate to support the spectrum of such workers? If none exist, I wonder if you might start or at least endorse a campaign some listeners listeners might start. You know, this is actually something that I've been thinking of because all that exists right now is separate strike funds
GoFundMes.
for each of the labor actions. So there is a strike fund for the Alabama miners. There's a strike fund for the John Deere workers. Each one of these actions, they set up a strike fund that are totally legitimate and which you should donate to. It goes directly to the workers. It helps them get through what could be very difficult times for them. I would say especially those Alabama miners, they have been out on strike for, what is it, 8-9 months now? I mean, this has been endless. They're heading into the Christmas season. These are not wealthy individuals, obviously, to start with. So if you had to give to one, I would say they really, really are out there, you know, on a limb and deserve your support. But I have been thinking about how nice it would be if there was like a general fund that you could just donate one place and it would be distributed among all of the striking workers across the country. Such a thing doesn't exist, but I do actually, it's something I've been thinking about as well, so that we could send people to one centralized place if you want to support striking workers who are taking labor action against their corrupt employers or whatever's going on. You can put money in this one fund. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist right now, but if you set it up, we will certainly tout it here.
Yeah, there you go. Please let us know. Right now, we're still figuring out how to make 4K cameras work, so that's what we're dealing with. Okay, next question from Matthew Lena, Progressive Fallout. What do you think that the fallout will look like for progressives if they say yes to these corporation billionaire-written bills? It really seems like it's in their best interest to say no. If they don't, they just look weak and dumb. They need to step up their chess game. I mean, very much fits with the theme of the show, huh, Krystal?
Yeah, I mean, they've lost all credit. But there was a moment when it was like, oh, they might actually have a little bit of power in Washington now because they drew a hard line and they forced Pelosi's hand. And and they actually stood together and had some red lines here. That moment has now passed. Now they're doing exactly what everybody expected them to do from the beginning, which is fold completely to leadership's wishes. You are absolutely right. This, the bill, what's left of it, is utterly pathetic. All of their so-called priorities that they care about have been either cut back to being effectively toothless and irrelevant, or they've been stripped down entirely. So if you go along with this I wouldn't even call it a half a loaf. If you go along with this, after having been so firm and so clear all the way along, they're never going to take you seriously again, and frankly, they shouldn't.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, you look in this, it's very, 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 very tepid in the way that they have handled themselves. They held a hard line, but the real thing is they don't have credibility because they keep caving on every single thing that they do, 100%. So nobody takes them seriously.
Yeah. People
take Manchin seriously because he actually would vote down the bill. That's it. It's actually so simple. The Freedom Caucus did this over and over and over again. I don't know why it is so difficult for these people, but I think they just don't have a clue.
They cannot handle any sort of media criticism. And if you are going to be even pretend to be a little bit anti-establishment, you have to be ready for the wrath of the ruling class. And it just seems like the second that there's a whiff of critique of their position from the media or Democratic leadership, they just instantly fold.
Yeah, very
sad.
True. Fits with our next question.
Speaking of the ruling class, from John McKenna, why do you think some people are so hesitant to believe things like the fact corporate interests control and influence mainstream media, or that there's such a thing as the deep state? Many people, especially upper middle class folk, dismiss these things as deranged conspiracy theories, which is deeply troubling and agitating.
So true.
We agree wholeheartedly. And it's weird because, liberals are, because it's this Trump reaction, right? The minute Trump says deep state, resistance liberals feel it in their bones that they must say, like, deep state's a conspiracy, that doesn't exist, that's not a thing, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas if you have, an actual left of center perspective over the course of history, like, this CIA, FBI, these are the military industrial complex, these are deeply rooted institutions that obviously control massively. They wield the power here in Washington routinely. So I think it's really just about a reaction opposite to Trump. If he says deep state, then it must be false. And then in terms of the having it hard to believe that corporate interests control or influence mainstream media, I think this also because, especially now that mainstream media is so firmly aligned outside of Fox News against Trump, then, well, these must be the good guys, right? It's all like, where do you fit on the spectrum versus Trump? You also have now a liberal, affluent base that, their corporate types that's who they are. That's who their friends are. So it doesn't feel like nefarious to them, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you really look at it and you consider, the problem is that everybody wants to talk about the other side's ruling class, right? So like you'll see endless segments on Fox about Bezos, tech executives, Mark Zuckerberg or whatever, but Rupert Murdoch literally owns Fox. So it's like, okay, well, he's also one of the biggest media moguls in the entire world.
Yeah,
and we're not going to talk about that. Same thing, NBC and NBC owned by Comcast and CNN owned by, multi-billion-dollar corporation, HBO Warner Media or whatever the hell it's called, also only wants to talk about Murdoch and not, the people who are like CEO of Comcast. So that's why you get screwed, because the ruling class is bipartisan. And the funniest part is that Murdoch and the Comcast people, they all hang out with one another. So like they all push the same tax policy. And when people get ripped apart, they don't want to focus on each other's they only want to focus on each other's problems and not the actual overall structure, which is how the structure keeps its power.
And everybody thinks the other side's ruling class are the ones that really control things.
Yeah, that's right.
And
like George Soros.
Both sides have a case to make, right? Because, and this was, I think, Matt Iglesias who made this point that I thought was really wise, which is liberals mostly control sort of cultural institutions. They control cultural power. And conservatives control actual institutions of power. I mean, the way that the Supreme Court, the way that the Congress is gerrymandered, the benefit of the Senate. So there's this sense of like they control the political power while liberals control the cultural power. And so both sides ends up feeling like they're both aggrieved.
Yes.
And like the other side is the one that's really in control.
Yeah, both sides is losing in a certain sense, and that actually makes things worse in terms of what they want to focus on.
Very true. Very true. All right, last question here from Christopher Fryer. Would more tax revenue from the rich actually replace and lower middle class taxes and pay for more good government? Or would it just be a higher rate of government waste and lining their pockets? It all depends, doesn't it?
It depends on your way that you look at taxation.
Well, so first of all, as to the numbers, because you have such overwhelming amounts at the top of the spectrum, there's no doubt there's a way that you can structure it where you could actually lower taxes for especially lower middle class and low income working class people and still make up the revenue because the rich people have all the money. So that math equation does work out. I think we saw during the pandemic both the possibility of government and also the bureaucratic, red tape and malaise that you can get from government too. The UBI checks went out. They went out very quickly. They didn't reach everybody, but they reached most everybody they were supposed to reach. They had a massive impact and they were incredibly important for getting people through this time. The unemployment system, which is rickety and apparently quite broken in certain states, it really dramatically failed people at critical times where, we played the video of people lined up for miles outside of the Kentucky State Capitol.
You had to call 800 times to get in.
And some people never succeeded. Yeah. People who were supposed to, who deserved it and who needed that help during a time when they were out of work for no fault of their own whatsoever, and that system crumbled. So it really depends. You can also see it with the housing funds that were supposed to go out and never did. The money was appropriated. It was sent out to the states and localities. But because it was such a poorly designed system, ultimately it didn't get into the hands of the people who needed it. So I know it's not a satisfying answer, but it really does matter, not just that you spend the money, but that you have programs designed that are effective, that are simple, that are streamlined, and that fundamentally respect that individual human beings are going to have the wherewithal to deal with the funds that you send them and not set up all this like means testing and red tape and all these hurdles to jump through that make it so that the programs break down and the money never gets where it's supposed to go.
Yeah, it's interesting, Chris. I would tell you that I would even challenge the mindset around how taxes pay for things given our debt to GDP ratio and all of that. And I would say that you should tax the rich solely to have a society in which you don't have generational and aristocratic wealth that builds up over time, and think about it more from that perspective and the social equitability rather than whenever it comes to actual spending. But this is my most galaxy-brained
No, but that's really true.
No, I know, but I'm just saying, it's very, very counter to how most people think about economic spending. I don't know how many times I have to say this. We're not Guinea-Bissau when you're the world's reserve currency. By the way, no disrespect to Guinea-Bissau. But, when you're the world's reserve currency, you can, and you're not a household balance sheet. That's not how things work.
It's not like balancing your checkbook. It doesn't obviously money in and equal money out.
Right.
I think you're right that the goal of taxing the rich should be an end in and of itself, despite how politicians talk about it here.
Yep, that's right. Okay.
All right, y'all. We love you guys. Have a fantastic weekend. We'll see you back here tomorrow.